You're joking, right? I asked, frozen with one sock still in my hand. Melissa stood at the hallway mirror, fixing her earrings, eyeliner already sharp enough to cut glass. What part would I be joking about, Nathan? I walked into the kitchen, my voice rising. The part where you casually drop. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to the party tonight because Kira changed it to girls only, like it's nothing. We've had this on the calendar for weeks. She didn't even glance at me. It's not a big deal. Just go without me. It's a couple's party, I said, trying to stay level. Leo specifically asked if we were both coming. You know how rare it is we get time with them. I see Leo every other week when he stops by the office, she said, finally turning to face me, arms crossed. You'll live. I stared at her. So that's it. Just plans changed and tough luck for me. Melissa rolled her eyes, brushing a curl behind her ear. Why are you making this about you? That line, that one lit a fuse in me. Because I made this plan for us, I said louder now. I've been looking forward to it. I bought wine. I even ironed my shirt, which you know I never do unless you ask. She scoffed. Don't act like you were preparing for prom. It's a backyard party. My jaw clenched. And you were fine with it until 10 minutes ago. Well, plans evolve. Kira's been going through a lot. And she wanted it to be a space for the girls. Emotional support, you know. Did you even tell her we were planning to come together? She paused. No, I didn't think it was worth the pushback. I blinked. Wow. So now it's not just about you skipping. You didn't even stand up for our plan. Melissa turned back to the mirror. God, Nathan, it's not a betrayal. I'm going to a party with my friends. What's with the drama? I stepped closer. The drama? Is you making unilateral decisions and treating me like a +1 in my own marriage, like I'm some background noise to be faded out when it's inconvenient. Her voice was icy. You're overreacting. Am I? I said more quietly now. Because it doesn't feel that way from where I'm standing. There was a pause long enough to feel like a dare. Then Melissa sighed, checking her phone. I'm leaving in 5. If you're going to sulk, at least be quiet about it. I watched her slip her heels on like none of this mattered, like I was a gust of wind blowing past her perfectly curated life. Do you even care how this feels? I asked. That got her to stop at the door. She looked at me then, not annoyed, not angry, just blank. I care about not being suffocated, she said, soft but sharp. Lately, everything with you feels like an obligation. I swallowed that one cut deep. She opened the door. Enjoy your night. Maybe call one of your buddies, play poker, whatever it is you do when I'm not entertaining you. Then she left. No hug, no kiss, no goodbye, just the sound of her heels clicking down the walkway and the door shutting like a sentence ending without a period. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, still wearing one sock, staring at the spot where she'd stood. My phone buzzed on the counter. Leo again, you guys on the way. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Melissa bailed. I'll catch you next time. I hit send. Then I set my phone down gently, opened the wine anyway, and poured myself a glass. The living room looked too clean, too still. And all I could think was how loud silence can be when someone chooses not to show up. Not just for a party, but for you. The next morning, the sky was overcast. The kind of dull gray that made everything feel quieter than it was. I was already up before the coffee machine even finished its cycle. I made 2 mugs out of habit, then stood there holding hers like I didn't know whether to set it down or pour it out. Eventually, I walked into the living room. Melissa was curled up on the couch in her robe, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. No good morning, no glance up, just the blue light from the screen reflecting in her eyes. I set her mug on the coffee table. I was thinking, I started keeping my voice even. Maybe we could get away for the weekend, just the 2 of us. That got her attention barely. She looked up, eyebrows raised. Where? Lake Geneva, I said. That cabin we stayed at last spring. You said you liked it. The one with the fireplace and that giant clawfoot tub you posted a dozen photos of. Melissa blinked, then tilted her head. You want to do a couples weekend now? I shrugged. Just thought it might be good for us. Step out of the usual talk without distractions. She let out a small humorless laugh and leaned her head back on the cushion. Nathan, no offense, but I really don't think soaking in a rented tub is going to fix anything. It's not about fixing, I said carefully. It's about trying. I'm still in this. I'm willing, right, she said, her voice flat. Because what screams romance like a desperate weekend retreat, I sat on the armrest of the chair across from her. You know what screams romance? Respect. Listening. Showing up. She lowered her phone, eyes narrowing. You don't get to make this about you being some wounded soldier. You've been distant for months, Nathan. I go out one night and suddenly I'm the villain. I didn't bite. I just nodded slowly. Okay, so you're not interested. She rolled her eyes. No, I'm not. I don't need a cabin in the woods. I need people who see me. My friends get me more than you do lately. That line landed with a quiet thud. I looked at her, not with anger, just clarity. I stood, smoothed my shirt, and picked up my keys. Thanks for the talk, I said, calm as a lake before a storm. She blinked. That's it. I nodded, walking to the door. Yeah, that's it. I didn't slam the door, didn't sigh, didn't leave with a parting shot, just stepped out into the cold November air and shut it gently behind me. No grand exit, just silence. Behind me in that quiet house. Melissa stayed frozen for a moment. I could picture it. Her still holding the phone. Unsure whether to keep scrolling or finally put it down because something had shifted. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. And that more than anything unsettled her. I drove with the windows cracked, letting the wind cut through the leftover heat in my chest. I wasn't running, wasn't chasing either. I just needed a little space to remember who I was, who I'd been before Melissa started treating me like wallpaper in our own home. The lake wasn't going anywhere. Maybe I'd still go alone. And maybe that would be the point. 2 days later, the house sounded different. Laughter echoing off the walls, glasses clinking, a soft jazz playlist humming beneath the chatter. The smell of grilled steak and roasted garlic drifted from the kitchen while I leaned against the counter, nursing a glass of bourbon. I hadn't hosted anything in months. It used to be Melissa's thing. Candles lit just so, playlist curated to impress. But this one was mine. Casual, last minute. Just a few close friends. Leo, his wife, and his younger sister Jenna. Bright, sarcastic, confident in that effortless way. The kind of energy that didn't need validation. I hadn't planned to invite her specifically. She just came along for the ride. And honestly, it felt good. Easy. No tightrope walking. Jenna stood beside me now, laughing at some dumb story Leo was telling. She nudged me. You used to be way funnier back in college. When did you get so grown up? I've been domesticated, I said with a crooked grin, holding up my drink. But I'm working on a comeback. She smirked, eyes playful. Well, so far so good. This is the most relaxed I've seen you in like ever. I glanced around the room. Everyone smiling, music pulsing low, the fireplace crackling. It felt like mine again. This house, this space, me. Then my phone buzzed. Melissa, don't wait for me tonight. No context, no warmth, just 7 words, ice cold. I stared at the message for a second longer than I should have. Leo saw my face shift. Everything cool? Yeah, I said simply. I lifted my phone and with zero hesitation angled it toward Jenna. She caught on immediately, leaned in close with a smirk and tilted her head playfully toward mine. Click. I typed. Nathan, don't worry. No one is waiting for you. Sent. No emoji. No explanation. Just that. Jenna chuckled softly, unaware of the full weight of what she just helped me do. Was that revenge or a warning shot? Call it. Balance, I said, tossing the phone on the counter like it didn't matter. But it did. It really, really did. 15 minutes passed. Then the front door flew open. Melissa, hair half straightened, still in her black blazer, high heels stomping over hardwood. "Are you serious right now, Nathan?" The music paused. Conversations froze mid-sentence. She marched into the kitchen, eyes locked on mine. Leo backed up instinctively, clearing the space between us. "You think that was funny? That photo? You want to play games now?" I met her fury with stillness. "You said, don't wait." "So, I didn't." "You're standing there grinning like this is some joke," she snapped. "Is that Jenna? Really? That's who you want to make your point with?" Jenna blinked, caught off guard. I'm not involved in whatever this is." I held up a calming hand to her. "You're fine, Jenna. This isn't about you." I turned back to Melissa. "You made your night yours. I made mine mine. Equal footing, right?" Her voice cracked slightly, still angry, but something else creeping in. "You're unbelievable." "No," I said, voice low but clear. "What's unbelievable is you thinking you could keep walking out of this house without consequence." She glanced at everyone around us, realizing suddenly she had an audience. Her voice dropped a notch, a little less sharp. "Can we talk alone?" I gestured toward the hallway. "Bedrooms down the hall." "Go ahead. I'll be right there." She turned and stormed off, heels clicking hard against the floor. I turned to my guests who stood awkwardly holding drinks. Not sure what to do. I gave a small smile. "Sorry about that. Happens when people don't knock." Leo let out a short laugh. "You good, man?" I nodded. "Give me 5. In the bedroom, Melissa was pacing like a metronome gone wild. "I can't believe you humiliated me like that." I leaned against the door frame. "You humiliated yourself. You walked out on this marriage weeks ago. I'm just finally learning how to breathe again." She threw her hands up. "So what now? You just entertain whoever walks through the door." "No," I said quietly. "I host my friends. I reclaim my peace and I don't wait for people who leave without looking back." She opened her mouth, but I was already walking past her. Back to the living room. Back to my night. Back to people who didn't make me feel invisible. I picked up my glass. Now, where were we? Jenna raised her glass with a playful smirk. "You were just about to make your comeback." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The morning light filtered in through the kitchen window, soft and diffused, making the leftover wine glasses sparkle like forgotten crystal. The house still smelled faintly of grilled meat and laughter. I stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing a stack of plates from the night before. The hum of the dishwasher was the only sound until I heard the shuffle of slippers behind me. Melissa, she was in one of my old college hoodies, her hair tied up in a messy knot. No makeup, no armor, just Melissa, quieter than usual. She didn't say anything at first. Just walked over, grabbed a trash bag, and started picking up paper napkins and half-eaten appetizers from the counter. It was surreal. We moved around each other like co-workers in a shared kitchen. Efficient, careful, not hostile, but definitely not warm. She was the one who broke the silence. "So, your party was fun," she said, not looking up. "It was," I replied simply, setting a rinsed glass onto the drying rack. A beat passed, then another. She straightened up slowly, keeping her tone casual. "That girl, the one in the photo, was that Leo's sister?" I didn't pause what I was doing. "Yeah, Jenna." Melissa nodded slowly. She seemed comfortable. "Comfortable?" I asked, now glancing at her. She forced a small smile. "I mean, in the picture, you two looked close." I wiped my hands on a towel. "She's easy to talk to. Doesn't try to win the room, just listens." That landed. I saw it in the slight shift of her posture, the twitch in her jaw, the way she suddenly focused a little too hard on tying up the trash bag. "I see," she said, her voice clipped. I leaned on the counter, watching her. It's rare feeling heard without having to explain yourself. Melissa kept her back to me, staring at the closed trash bin. "That must be nice," she said finally. It was, I answered, not cruelly, just honestly. She turned around then, arms crossed. The trash bag forgotten at her feet. I didn't mean for things to get so. She trailed off, searching for the right word. Quiet. I offered. She nodded. Yeah. I gave her a faint smile. Not sarcastic, not bitter, just real. Neither did I. And with that, I picked up another glass, ran it under warm water, and let the silence settle back in. Not heavy, not sharp, just different, like we were both realizing something at the same time. But neither of us had the courage to say it out loud. Not yet. 3 evenings later, I stood in front of the hallway mirror, buttoning up a navy shirt I hadn't worn in years. Crisp collar, sleeves rolled clean at the cuffs. Not for work, not for show, just for me. The faint scent of cedar cologne clung to the collar like a memory I hadn't visited in a while. Are you going somewhere? Melissa's voice floated in from the living room. I didn't answer right away. Just adjusted the watch on my wrist. Took one last look at the men in the mirror, then stepped into the hallway. Leo and I are meeting up at the Velvet Note. I said, jazz night. Melissa looked up from the couch. She was in sweats. A blanket across her legs, but her expression held something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hesitation. You didn't say anything about plans, she said almost too lightly. I didn't think I had to, I replied, grabbing my coat from the rack. She shifted upright. You didn't seem like you were in a jazz mood lately. I gave a quiet smile. I'm rediscovering things. She stood then, folding the blanket over the armrest. I could come with you if you want. I mean, if Leo doesn't mind. There it was, the offer. A month ago, I'd have said yes out of habit, out of hope. But now, I slipped on my jacket and turned to her. I think I'd rather go alone tonight. Melissa blinked. Alone? Yeah, I said gently. I've been needing space. Not the kind that screams get out. Just the kind where I can hear myself again. She took a breath, arms crossing in front of her almost defensively. Is this because of the other night? No, I said, it's because of every night before that. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to object, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just watched me, eyes tracing over the unfamiliar calm in my posture. I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door. I'll be back late. Don't wait up, Nathan. She said quickly, taking a small step toward me. You're acting different. I paused with one hand on the doorknob. No, I'm just finally acting like myself. Then I opened the door. The cold evening air rolled in, brushing past both of us like a curtain shifting in the wind. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me without a sound. Inside, I imagined her still standing there in that warm, dim room, staring at the space I'd left behind. Not because I was punishing her, but because for the first time, she wasn't automatically included in where I was going. And that maybe more than anything said what I wasn't ready to explain out loud. She wasn't part of my world by default anymore. She had to earn her way back in. The booth near the corner was dimly lit. Tucked away from the soft clinking of glasses and the breathy warmth of a saxophone drifting through the speakers. The Velvet Note wasn't packed, but it buzzed with quiet elegance. Familiar faces, low laughter, no forced smiles. I sat across from Leo, a glass of good bourbon warming my hand. He stirred his old-fashioned with a slow, absent-minded motion, like he was waiting for me to get to whatever I needed to say. You ever look at your life? I said, and feel like you're visiting it, not living it. He smiled behind the rim of his glass. That the question you've been bottling up since appetizers? Maybe. Leo leaned back, elbows resting on the polished mahogany. You talking about Melissa? I nodded. I don't think we're partners anymore. Not in the way that matters. His face didn't shift. No surprise there. Leo had seen this coming before I did. She used to ask me about my day. I said like she really wanted to know. Now it's like we're both narrating separate documentaries under the same roof. Leo snorted softly. Yeah, man. Been there. We paused as the waitress dropped off a small plate of pecan pie slices. Leo gave her a nod of thanks, then turned back to me. You still love her, I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I admitted. I think I loved who she was when we still knew each other. Now I can't tell if I'm mourning her or myself. Leo nodded, not needing clarification. Sometimes things don't fall apart in one big crash. Sometimes they just run out of gas. Yeah. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. That's what it feels like. Like we're out of momentum, out of reasons. We both sat with that for a moment. Remember that summer after graduation? Leo said suddenly. We took my old Jeep down to Nashville, ran out of money halfway, and ate nothing but canned beans and gas station jerky for 2 days. I laughed into my drink. And you got sunburned so bad your ears peeled like dried paint. Worth it, he said. Back then everything felt like a maybe. Now it's just calendars and appointments and making sure the recycling gets out. Exactly. I muttered. Leo leaned forward. Let me ask you something. Are you done? I looked up. With what? Trying. I didn't know how to answer that. Part of me felt like I'd been trying alone for so long. I'd forgotten what it was like to be met halfway. The other part was tired. Bone tired. I think I said carefully. I'm done trying to hold the whole thing up by myself. Leo raised his glass. Then maybe it's not about ending something. Maybe it's about stopping what hurts. We clinked glasses softly. The saxophone eased into a minor key. The lights above flickered just slightly, casting a warm golden wash over the table. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't trapped in someone else's life. I was just a man sitting with a friend, breathing his own air again. It was a little after midnight when I pulled into the driveway. The street was quiet, glazed in amber from the street lamps. A few porch lights blinked faintly down the block, but our house was fully lit, which meant she was waiting. I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me with a soft finality, and there she was. Melissa stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, barefoot, her expression unreadable but brittle. She'd changed out of her sweats, now wearing that soft maroon sweater I once bought her on a rainy anniversary trip to Asheville. Her eyes, rimmed with unshed tears, were locked onto me like I just walked in from another woman's arms. Did you have fun? She asked. Not curious, accusatory. I hung my coat. Yeah, it was good to catch up. She followed me a few steps as I walked toward the kitchen. You didn't text. You said you didn't want to wait up. Her voice cracked. That's not what I meant, and you know it. I reached for a glass and filled it slowly at the sink, not turning around. The silence between her words was louder than the faucet. Who are you really with? She asked. I took a sip of water before answering. Leo and Jenna, she pushed. I finally turned to face her. You're really asking me that? She hesitated. You seem different. You're pulling away. I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice low. No, I'm just not chasing anymore. That stopped her cold. She blinked hard. So that's it. You're just done. I've been trying for a long time, I said. Trying to be patient, trying to talk when you'd rather disappear behind your phone. Trying to make plans you cancel last minute. I stopped asking why. I stopped reacting. And now you want passion again. Tears filled her eyes now. Unsteady and thick. I don't know how to reach you anymore. You're colder than I've ever seen you. No, I said gently. I'm just not bleeding for this every day. She walked toward me fast, anger bubbling under the heartbreak. Then what do you want from me, Nathan? Should I beg, cry, sleep with someone just to make you feel something again? I flinched. Not from the words, but from how far she was willing to push this. You don't need to break things just to see what I'll do, I said calmly. That used to work maybe, but not now. Her voice dropped, trembling. Do you even love me anymore? I looked at her, not with cruelty, but with the kind of clarity that comes after months of peeling off disappointment like dead skin. I don't think that's the question you're really asking, I said. Then what is? She whispered. You want to know if I still hurt? I replied. If I still get angry, if I still light up or fall apart over you. But you can't feel anything when you're numb. And I've been numb for a while. Melissa covered her face with both hands and sat on the armrest, shoulders hunched like the words had weight. I don't know how we got here, she murmured. I looked around the room, the photos, the stacked mail, the vase she'd picked out 2 years ago. I do, I said. We stopped being us and started being two people who resented what we couldn't name. She lifted her head. So what now? We just go to sleep like everything's fine. No, I said. We go to sleep knowing everything's not. I walked past her, set my glass in the sink, and moved toward the hallway. Nathan, she said, but not as a question, more like a name you say when you realize the conversation isn't just ending. It's closing a door. I paused. I'm not being cruel, I said, my back still to her. I'm being honest. And then I walked down the hall, leaving her sitting there in the quiet, not alone, but no longer sure where she stood. 3 days passed. Not a word between us. We moved around each other like fog around street lamps. Quiet, distant, always barely there. Meals were silent. Lights flicked on and off without question. She slept on the far edge of the bed if she came to bed at all. And me, I didn't chase. By the 4th morning, I came downstairs and found her waiting at the kitchen table, still in her robe, coffee in hand, eyes focused, but guarded. Her hair was tied back, but strands had fallen across her forehead like she hadn't bothered to fix it. Nathan, she said, voice even. We should talk. I pulled a mug from the cupboard and filled it without asking. Okay. She waited until I sat across from her. I've been thinking, she began. This whatever this is now isn't working. I think maybe we should stop pretending. I took a sip of coffee. It wasn't hot enough. I didn't flinch. Okay, I said. She blinked. That's it. You brought it up. I'm agreeing. I'm saying I want a divorce, she said more sharply, as if I hadn't heard it right the first time. I looked at her, not through her, not around her, directly at her. I know, I said quietly. And you're probably right. For a split second, something cracked across her face. A flicker of disbelief. That's all you have to say. I set the mug down. You've been gone for months, Melissa. This isn't new to me. You're not even going to try to talk me out of it. I've tried, I said, calm and unshaken. But you weren't listening. Not when I asked if we could talk. Not when I suggested we go away. Not when I stood in the kitchen asking if you cared. Her voice broke. You're really just letting me go. I'm letting go of holding this alone, I said. There's a difference. Tears built in her eyes now. Not like the ones from guilt or shame. These were angry, sharp-edged. You know what's worse than leaving? She said, rising from her chair, being the only one who ever mattered enough to be fought for. I stared at her. You mattered. That's why I fought. But after a while, I realized I was fighting with myself. And the version of you I remembered isn't the one sitting across from me now. She clenched her jaw. Unbelievable. You're just ice. No, I said gently, standing up. I'm just empty. She stepped back from the table, grabbing her phone and purse without another word. I followed her to the front door, not to stop her, just to see her off. Like someone watching a final train pull out of the station. Her hand was on the doorknob when she turned back, eyes wide and wet. This isn't how I thought it would end, she whispered. Neither did I said. But it's still ending. Then she flung the door open and left without looking back. And this time, she slammed it. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and quiet desperation. I sat on the bench outside the hearing room, fingers laced together, watching a clock that moved too slowly. Across from me, Melissa sat stiff in her blazer, arms crossed, legs angled away. We hadn't spoken since she left the house 2 weeks ago. She looked confident, composed, like this was a step up, not a fallout. When her attorney arrived, tall, fast-talking, too polished, he greeted her with a smirk and a folder. She leaned in, listening like she was being handed a blueprint to a better life. Mine was simpler, an older man named Tom, who'd represented my dad for decades. Gray hair, steel eyes, and a kind of stillness that made people underestimate him. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. The hearing room was small, just a judge, a clerk, 2 attorneys, and the weight of everything we'd let fall apart. Melissa didn't look at me as we sat. She stared forward, arms still crossed, posture of someone expecting to win. Her attorney opened strong. "Your Honor, my client is seeking equitable division of property and spousal support. She has invested emotionally and domestically in the marriage for over 6 years." The judge raised an eyebrow and the assets in question, the primary residence, a 2020 Lexus RX and a joint savings account totaling approximately $118,000. Tom stood calmly. "Your Honor, all 3 assets, house, vehicle, and account are in Mr. Keller's name and predate the marriage." Melissa turned toward me sharply. "What?" Tom continued, "The house and car were inherited from Mr. Keller's late father. The savings account was set up in Nathan's name by his family's estate before the wedding. All documents provided." Melissa's attorney stuttered, flipping papers, "But she lived there. She maintained the household." Tom nodded and missed her. "Keller paid for everything. Every bill, every credit card, even Melissa's student loans, and respectfully her online boutique venture." Melissa looked stunned now, like someone had moved the finish line just as she reached for it. The judge scanned the documents and leaned back. "This isn't a marital property case. This is a dissolution of living arrangements. There is Northwest shared estate." Melissa's voice cracked. "That can't be right. That house," he said, "it was ours." I looked at her then for the first time all morning. "It felt like ours," I said, "because I wanted it to. But it wasn't. It was mine. Just like I took care of everything else because I believed in us." Her lips parted, but no words came. Tom continued, "My client is not seeking alimony. He only requests closure." Melissa's lawyer whispered urgently, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on me, wide with disbelief. In something else, panic. The hearing room was small, just a judge, a clerk, 2 attorneys, and the weight of everything we'd let fall apart. Melissa didn't look at me as we sat. She stared forward, arms still crossed, posture of someone expecting to win. Her attorney opened strong. "Your Honor, my client is seeking equitable division of property and spousal support. She has invested emotionally and domestically in the marriage for over 6 years." The judge raised an eyebrow and the assets in question, the primary residence, a 2020 Lexus RX and a joint savings account totaling approximately $118,000. Tom stood calmly. "Your Honor, all 3 assets, house, vehicle, and account are in Mr. Keller's name and predate the marriage." Melissa turned toward me sharply. "What?" Tom continued, "The house and car were inherited from Mr. Keller's late father. The savings account was set up in Nathan's name by his family's estate before the wedding. All documents provided." Melissa's attorney stuttered, flipping papers, "But she lived there. She maintained the household." Tom nodded and missed her. "Keller paid for everything. Every bill, every credit card, even Melissa's student loans, and respectfully her online boutique venture." Melissa looked stunned now, like someone had moved the finish line just as she reached for it. The judge scanned the documents and leaned back. "This isn't a marital property case. This is a dissolution of living arrangements. There is Northwest shared estate." Melissa's voice cracked. "That can't be right. That house," he said, "it was ours." I looked at her then for the first time all morning. "It felt like ours," I said, "because I wanted it to. But it wasn't. It was mine. Just like I took care of everything else because I believed in us." Her lips parted, but no words came. Tom continued, "My client is not seeking alimony. He only requests closure." Melissa's lawyer whispered urgently, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on me, wide with disbelief. In something else, panic. Dark circles under her eyes. A sweater 2 sizes too big hung off one shoulder. She clutched her phone in both hands like it was a shield. "Hi," she said softly. I didn't speak. Her eyes filled almost immediately, though no tears fell. "Can I come in?" I held the door open without a word. She stepped inside like a guest in a house she used to own. Melissa stood in the entryway looking around, but not with nostalgia. It was more like she was confirming something had changed. "It looks different," she said. I nodded. "It is." She glanced down, swallowed hard. I didn't know who else to come to. I crossed my arms, leaning lightly against the wall. "What's going on?" She hesitated. And then, like a dam giving out, the words came fast. "I lost my apartment. Rent late. And the friend I was staying with left for Colorado. I'm trying to pick up extra shifts at the cafe, but it's not enough. And my mom can't help right now, and I didn't know if I should even come here, but I didn't know where else to go." I let the silence hang there. She looked up, and "There's something else I should have told you before. During the divorce, my jaw didn't move. I waited." She took a step closer, her voice almost inaudible now. "I wasn't always faithful. I mean, not physically, not at first, but emotionally. I stepped out long before we ended. There was someone from work. It didn't last, but it still happened." I nodded once slow. Her lips parted like she expected some reaction, a snapped insult, a bitter laugh, a slammed door, but none came. I walked past her into the study, opened the drawer, pulled out an envelope I'd prepared weeks ago. Not for her, but in case someone I once cared about came back bruised by the world she thought she understood better than me. I handed it to her. "This should cover 2 months. It's not a rescue, just a runway." Melissa stared at it, blinking. "You're not even going to ask why?" "No, I said you came here because you thought I might still be the only person who wouldn't throw it in your face." "You were right." She took the envelope with shaking hands. "I don't deserve this." "I know," I said gently. "But I'm giving it anyway." Her chin trembled. "Why?" "Because I loved you once. And because letting someone fall isn't the only way to be done." For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she stepped back toward the door. "I'm sorry," she said, "about everything." I opened the door for her. She walked out without waiting for a response, and I closed it behind her, not with anger, just finality. The second time she knocked, I didn't feel anything. No anticipation, no dread, just stillness. The same way you might feel when a chapter you've already closed is reread by someone else. Too late to change the ending. It had been a quiet month. I'd filled it with simple routines. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market. Weeknight runs through Lincoln Park. Friday night jazz sets with Leo. My house had started to sound like me again. And now she stood on the porch. Melissa wore jeans, a soft beige coat, and no makeup. She didn't look broken this time, just tired, like someone who'd finally looked in the mirror and saw the shape of her own choices. "Hi," she said. I nodded. "Hey," she didn't ask to come in. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope I had given her weeks ago. "I don't need it anymore," she said. "I picked up more shifts, found a roommate. It's not much, but it's mine." I took the envelope and slipped it into my back pocket without a word. "I also came to say, thank you," she added. She hesitated, then looked up at me fully, her eyes no longer defensive, just real. "I know I said a lot of things during the divorce, and before things I thought were true or wanted to believe were true, just to make myself feel better." I stayed quiet, let her speak. "But the truth is, you were good to me. For a long time, I just didn't see it. I took your steadiness for granted. And when you stopped chasing, I mistook it for coldness. But you were just done carrying everything alone." Her voice wavered. "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "Not forgiveness, not a second chance. I just needed to say it." I nodded slowly. "I'm glad you finally understand," I said. She gave a small sad smile. "Me, too." We stood there for a few seconds more. No tension, no fire, just the quiet recognition of two people who had run their course. Then I stepped aside gently, leaving the doorway open. "Take care of yourself, Melissa." She nodded. "You, too, Nathan," and she turned. I watched her walk down the porch steps, not as a man, hoping she'd look back, but as someone ready for her not to. Then I closed the door behind her, not with anger, just peace. And that was the end of the story. Melissa returned my money and apologized. But was that a real step toward growth or just her way of easing guilt? I'm wondering if you were in her shoes, would you have come back to return it or stayed gone? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if this story pulled you in, hit that like button and subscribe. There's more where this came from.